Welcome to Business Connection. I'm Liz Spencer. We have a fascinating guest in studio. It's Detective Rich Wistocki of BeSure Consulting. Rich, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
People may recognize your face because you're well known as a great officer, a great cyber expert. Tell me about your background.
I appreciate that. So I spent 30 years in law enforcement. First 2 years was the Village Summit Police Department, where I grew up. And then, quite frankly, I got tired of arresting all my friends I grew up with. So I started to test all over the place, and then I became a police officer in Naperville. And I spent 4.5 years in patrol. And then in 1995, I went into juvenile investigations, where we would handle all the juvenile things that were going on, you know, thefts and burglaries and things like that. And then in 1997, we had a 13-year-old who was picked up by a internet predator from Tennessee. He picked her up, brought her to a hotel, raped her, and luckily didn't kill her and let her go back home. She told her parents what happened. They came to the police department, and he met her on this thing called America Online. You ask kids what America Online is now, and they have no idea what that is. Yeah. That just goes to show you our age. So we didn't know what to do. So my partner, Mike Sullivan, said, let's just do it like we do drugs, undercover. So we took over her account. Lo and behold, 3-4 months later, he came back and tried to do it again, but he met us. So Dave Dial, who was our chief back then, he was a visionary, and he said, if there's a place where adults can meet children behind their parents' back, this is the future of child exploitation, and he created the Internet Crimes Unit for the Naperville Police Department. So fast forward a little bit, we started doing predators and hunting down predators all the time, saving kids, and then our job started to become teaching in schools. So we show kids how to be empowered not to be victims. We show parents how to watch their kids, because their kid is their responsibility, not only with their food, clothing, shelter, and education, but they are also responsible for the technology. Then we were showing faculty what to do when a kid discloses in school. And then I go around and I teach law enforcement throughout the country how to investigate internet crime. So as we were making all these arrests and things like that, Naperville was known as the premier place where you would know how to, people relied on us to do their internet crimes. So there's something called the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force by the Department of Justice. We were one of the founding members, and there are currently 61 ICACs throughout the United States, and there's 5,000 people like myself.
Wow.
Yes. So, so as I'm teaching in schools, I started being asked to go teach in other schools outside Naperville. Well, Naperville wasn't going to pay for me to go and do that, so I created a company called BeSureConsulting.com. At BeSure, the reason why I made it BeSure, because I always found myself telling parents, no, you have to be sure they did this. You have to be sure. So I found myself saying this every day, so this was just a natural progression. So I started BeSure Consulting, and I taught locally in other school districts and things like that. So I was asked last year to do a TEDx, a TED Talk. And I only had 12 minutes, and as you well know, my stuff is like 2 hours. So I was asked to do a TED Talk by Arthur Zards, and right before I went on stage, Arthur said, are you ready for this? And I'm like, what's the big deal? I do this all the time. He goes, you know there's 2,000 people out there. And I'm like, well, thanks, Arthur, for that. And he says, are you ready for your life to change? I'm like, what's the big deal? He goes, you have no idea what the power of TED is. So they released the TED Talk, and I was getting calls from all over the country to go teach in schools, from California to Naples, Florida, to Arizona, to everywhere. And I was hardly at Naperville Police Department. So my bosses, who I was in SWAT for 22 years, all my bosses were my SWAT brothers, and they're like, do you know you're only at work 2 to 3 days a week? Do you have cases due? I said, hey, my cases are done, you know. And they're like, you really need to think about replacing you, and you need to start training someone. So I said, okay. So I trained someone, and I had to retire because I had so much need from schools to teach your parents and the kids. That's what I did. So I retired last year in February, and now it gives me the ability to create.
So, Rich, you've done wonderful training, and people I know in the community have been so responsive and excited, and thank you for educating us.
Thank you.
Now, you have also discovered or created something new called cyberparenting101.com.
Yes.
So tell me how that got going.
So cyberparenting-101.com was an idea that I had when a dad had called me from Los Angeles earlier this year. He said that he wanted me to make him a cyber certified parent. And I'm like, tell me what happened. He goes, well, I have an 8-year-old daughter, and her mother is her best friend and lets her have Snapchat, Instagram, and you're not even supposed to be on it until you're 13. So when I have daddy time with my 8-year-old daughter, I don't let her be on any of that stuff. Well, she complains to my ex-wife, her mother, and because my daughter thought I was being abusive, they took me back to court. And I'm like, what happened when you went to court? He says, well, my ex-wife wanted to shorten my visitation with my daughter because I don't let her talk to her online friends, right? So when she proposed what she wanted to do to the judge laughed at her and said, both of you parents, don't come back to my courtroom until you have 12 hours of cyber parenting training. The judge, in his infinite wisdom, knows that doesn't exist just to get him out of the courtroom. But when this dad told me that, I was like, oh my God. Through my career, I've seen parents, when they go through divorce, one parent is the cool parent, one parent is the jerk parent that puts all the rules, and they use kids and their technology against them. And who does it hurt? It actually hurts the kid. If the parents are not on the same page when it comes to technology, the kid will use that parent against the other. So I decided to create cyberparenting-101.com. So I thought of Netflix, and so what I did was I went into studio and I took the 2.5 hours of my training that I do for parents and drugs and vaping, and I cut them up into 10 to 15 minute segments with quizzes. So you just watch, you can watch it on any device. You can, when you stop in the middle of it, you can pick up where you left off, just like Netflix. And then you take these little short quizzes. And at the end, when you've seen all the videos, you take a final test, and then you get a certificate. So as I'm thinking about this would be great for juvenile court. So now I'm contacting all the counties in juvenile and family law. So now I'm meeting with the bar associations in every county and showing them what this does. So then I was asked to do a presentation by DCFS. And I just so happened to mention, hey, we just released this new thing. And they're like, you're kidding me. And we are redoing our social network training. So we would like you to present this. So I presented it, and they absolutely loved it. So now what we're in negotiations with right now is that if you want to be a foster parent, you have to take cyberparenting-101 and get your certificate so you know how to handle the kids that are under your purview in technology.
That's awesome. I think it's good for any parent. I mean, whether you're in a tough situation.
Absolutely.
Every parent, I think, needs to understand it because the kids are always 5 or 10 years ahead of us on technology. No matter,
they are. Absolutely. With all the apps and all the games and all that stuff. So we really, parents need to be empowered again. Because the biggest thing, especially for my TED Talk, is that there's no such thing as privacy for children. The frontal cortex of their brains, their decision-making brain, are not developed enough to handle what goes on social networks. So simple things as when you allow your child to have a social network and they're like in 4th and 5th grade, like when I teach in these schools, the kids are 8, 9, 10 years old, right? So this is just a little portion of what we have in Cyber Parenting 101. So I show the parent, I said, okay, you allowed your kid to have the Snapchat at 8 or 9 years old. Because my kid would never do that, right? So what the kid says is then when they go and make their account, they have to put their date of birth in. Well, they have to be 13, right? But let's face it, our kids are not the best mathematicians in the world. So they're like, okay, if I'm born in 2011, how old do I have to be? Oh, heck, I'm just going to round up to 2000. So I ask kids that I teach, how many of you rounded up to 2000? They all raise their hand. So how old are they?
19, 20.
So you have 8-year-olds posing as 19-year-olds. Who do you think is going to talk to them? Adults.
Adults.
Who do you think is going to ask them for pictures and videos? Adults. Who do you think is going to try to get pictures and videos from them and talk to them? Adults. What parents don't realize, because my kid would never do that. So at Cyber Parenting 101, does is that we put them in a situation and we show them exactly what kids are doing now so they can prevent and be smarter than the kid. And this is why we need to monitor. This is why I need to check your messages or your videos or where you're hiding pictures and vaults and things like that.
Rich, you are helping us in a very tough situation of cyber intelligence that we never thought of as parents, that we would ever be here and having to protect our kids from somebody we can't see.
Right.
So I thank you very much for what you're doing. We're super excited for cyberparenting-101.com.
Right.
That's the next best thing from you. You're always thinking ahead for us. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
We'll be right back with more Business Connections. Stay tuned.